Purple Line is a community podcast bringing you in-depth conversations with diverse leaders in the public and private sectors. Whether you're a student looking to gather advice or a professional tuning in for valuable resources, our dynamic programming provides inspiration and insights for all ages and backgrounds. I'm Marianne Gomez-Horta, your host of the Purple Line podcast and the CEO of the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute. Welcome. All right, Daniel Garza, oh my God, this is so exciting to have a conversation with you. So I'm going to start with a couple of things that we have in common.
Okay.
To kind of, make it real official that we've known each other for quite a while here. American of Mexican heritage.
Yes.
Children of farm workers.
Yes.
Fathers who believe in the rule of law and opportunities for all in the United States.
Correcto.
That's kind of about all we have in common, dear. Because then you took it to another level. You're a former local elected official, appointed official in the White House under George W. Bush, and then a founder of a national organization called the Libre Initiative.
Correct.
So I'm going to start with a little bit on the back here. Okay. So tell us a little bit about growing up as a child of farm workers, the migrant experience. From what I recall, you were one of the families that did go back and forth, yes. Whereas after the first time that we did it, Dad was like, these girls are going to drive me crazy, because Dad has 4 girls. At the time, it was just 2 of us, but even then, that was a lot. So just, a lot of our leadership, a lot of who we bring every day is based on how we grew up. So share a little bit of that with the audience.
Yeah. So growing up a farm worker was, as Charles Dickens says, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times, right? The best of times in the sense that, I grew up with family, with cousins, right? And we traveled in packs.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And looking for contracts in Nebraska and California and the state of Washington, where I mostly grew up. Mm-hmm. And then we would travel todos, to Mexico during the wintertime.
Right.
And it was, we were church-going people. We sort of looked out for each other, lived in a sort of a bubble. So I never got involved in gangs or,
Yeah, I know. Neither
drugs
did I. I mean,
or,
they weren't even around.
Vices.
Nobody's coming to check on us.
We kind of took care of each other, right? And there was no peer pressure to do that stuff.
Right.
And so in that sense, I grew up healthy, and in physical labor. But the physical labor part was really hard, right? Because one, it doesn't pay well. You work under the elements.
Right.
You don't get treated with the kind of respect that I felt my parents deserved, or my aunts and uncles. And obviously, cuando se acaba una corrida, you look for the other one, right? So you're always constantly hustling, looking for a job, and you have to move from one bad rental home to another.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So what was it? Was it orchards, crops, field? What was it?
It was the beets.
So what did you
Nebraska,
work the most?
Apples, probably.
Okay.
Only because
in Washington.
It was more of an extended season. But it was apples, pears, peaches, cherries, prunes, anything that grew under the sun.
Do you still eat all those
grapes
apples,
in California?
prunes, cherries?
I do.
Or you're like,
actually.
boy, cut them now.
The toughest work that I did, I'll be honest, was picking asparagus.
That's hard.
You're bent over all day. It's hot sun.
Yeah.
Sometimes
My dad
you do
did
it twice over in the field because it grows back fast.
Yeah.
And being tall, because I'm 6'1", relatively tall, it's harder to.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so.
And you have to cut them right at a certain angle too, because of the blade.
But I love asparagus. I love eating asparagus.
Okay, that's good. See, mom and dad had in Central California potatoes, onions, corn, and asparagus. And the asparagus season was the roughest.
I never did any of those except asparagus.
So I cut onion for 1 week.
Oh.
And I couldn't get the smell of the onions from underneath my nails.
Rough. Yeah.
And I'm like, what's the other option? And mom was like, well, it's either you keep doing this or you go to school.
Peaches,
so I was like,
peaches was tough for me because of the fuzz. And
yeah.
Fishing the whole day and hot August sun. And it was hard, Marianne, because we skipped so many days from the school. Back then there weren't any rules, of truancy on the parents or any restrictions.
Right.
And so, we would leave for 2 months out of the year to Mexico or miss every other day working in the orchards and the fields. And one day, Aris Diaz, who was our counselor, calls me in and she says, kid, I'm going to show you something. And she sort of took a paper and she said, this is your transcript. And it looked like a checkerboard, right? It was a bunch of black and white squares. And she said, you're gone every other day, and then you leave to Nebraska for a month, and then you're gone to Mexico for 3 months.
Wow.
We're not going to let you pass.
What grade was this?
This was 10th grade.
Wow.
And I said, well, Miss Diaz, what happens next year? When I have to go through the same, seasonal, pattern. And she says, well, then you're going to have to repeat the 10th grade again.
Ay, Dios.
That was my last day of school. I'm a high school dropout, because of being a farmer.
Wow.
Worked in the fields till I was 19, actually.
Okay.
But my second chance, thank God for this country of second chances, was a GED. That got me back on track, went off to college, and, then it got on an interesting track.
Now, are you siblings? Are you the eldest, or?
I'm the second.
You're the second.
Of the boys, yeah. It's,
of the boys, how
Adam,
many
my
of
brother,
you?
older brother, and then I got 2 younger sisters.
So were they all at the same time growing up working in the fields?
Adam, myself, and Marisa
Okay.
worked in the fields. My youngest sister, she escaped all that.
Okay, because there's always one. There's usually one that's like,
Yeah,
they're like looking at you going, oh, wait a minute.
My parents risked all the money that they had in a small business, and it took off. And by then, my sister had grown up. So she was the spoiled, pampered one who didn't work hard like the rest of us.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I still love my little spoiled, pampered sister, too. So
we love her, too.
Yeah. So, was there some specific advice during that time? You're reminding me a little bit of the story of astronaut Jose Hernandez.
Yeah.
También un amigo. Very similar, like growing up working in the fields and always having this dream, and his dad kind of giving this little formula for life success. Did you have that sense from your mom or dad or people or tias of like, okay,
Yes.
High school didn't work out, we've been going back and forth, you can't be doing this forever? Like, where did that kind of grit start from?
Yeah, interesting you call it grit because it is perseverance.
Yeah.
And it's also like a vision that they have in their mind. Yeah, they came to America because they saw America as the promised land, right? Where they were going to achieve what they couldn't achieve in Mexico. And honestly, my parents are 2 folks with a 4th grade education. In rural Mexico, that's as far as it went.
Yeah, exactly.
If you wanted to go further, you needed to take a bus every day to Monterrey, Nuevo Leon, and come back, an hour later, an hour to and from. And so that wasn't an option for them. And their parents also, obviously were rural folks, agricultural. And so my parents, they wanted a better life for themselves and for their children. And so they knew that if they put their nose to the grindstone, made the right decisions, worked hard, at a certain point, they would, go up the economic ladder and, of course, achieve the American dream, which they did. The lesson that I learned from them was, how structured and disciplined they were and how focused they were on achieving that, even though they went through really hard work. Looking back now, the lessons that I learned from what my parents' life and their experiences, I now apply it at the Libre Initiative. And what I mean by that is my parents didn't know English. My parents didn't have a high school diploma.
Yeah.
My parents didn't have legalidad, citizenship. They didn't have a driver's license when they first started. If we had accelerated all those things, they would have accelerated their rise up the economic ladder.
Yeah, and their trajectory would have been much shorter.
Much shorter
right?
in the fields, that hard work. Exactly.
You and I would be having a
and
completely different conversation.
High school.
Right.
So what we do at the Libre Initiative is we provide English classes. We help people get their citizenship. We help them get their driver's license. We help them get a GED. All these things that other Americans take for granted.
Yeah.
When we talk about equal opportunity, it's not really equal opportunity if you're facing these barriers. You need to achieve certain basic things in America to position yourself in the marketplace at least at an equal footing.
Right.
Then there's other things you can do that can gain you an advantage through, university and vocational skills or, learning how to do a startup, lo que sea, right? But the point is, at least a very basic equal opportunity space is hard when you don't know the language. When you don't have a driver's license.
Look, my dad came in the Bracero program in 1952 from a little town in the state of Michoacan, and we always joke around that, like, if you're leaving Morelia and you get on the one big freeway to, like, Zamora, it's like one sign exit, right? And if you miss it, you miss the little town. Yeah. But the same thing. So he's the eldest of 8, only could finish 3rd grade, and he wanted to continue to learn.
Yes, of course
but
you do.
His dad was like, you've got more siblings, and in order to get to fourth grade, you
trabajar.
gotta get to Morelia. At that time, there was no freeway, right? So basically means no.
You're stuck.
You're
That's
there's
what happened to my
nothing
parents.
else, and so I think it's also really interesting because, like your tios and tias and others around us, it's like they also saw other people in other families whose children or siblings were able to get an education or finish high school. And that's a very powerful focus and drive that we were monetarily poor, but I look back on it now, right? And I'm thinking, okay, I always complained that I was like 45 minutes away from what I called civilization because it took 45 minutes to drive to like the intersection of the town of the big city of Stockton.
But Marianne, to that point,
it was good.
it was good, right?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say I wouldn't trade 1 second of my life and my life experiences for anybody else's.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
I totally,
especially not for a
grateful
big
for
town.
America.
Like it's just really different. I mean, I think
it makes you appreciative. I think we've lost the sense of gratitude in America.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for what my parents did, for what other folks who entered my life and opened doors for me, for what America means to millions and millions of immigrants who have come to America and have been able to achieve the American dream. It's taken a long time and hard work to get there, but no other country has allowed more people to achieve their aspirations like this country has in the history of the world.
So that brings me to another accomplishment of yours is why run for local office? So you were a local elected official. So share with us a little bit what was that experience like, and why did you even do it?
Yeah, I think I'm going to say out of necessity. Necessity in the sense that the city of Toppenish, Washington, in the center of the Yakima Valley, is about 80% Latino. By the time I ran, it was maybe 30%. When we showed up in that
it's
little
probably
town.
90% now.
Now it's 90%, and Michoacán, Guanajuato,
yeah.
So
apples is the main.
Apples, yeah,
That's the
agriculture,
main,
agriculture.
yeah.
Grapes now is a big deal.
Hops.
In the hops, exactly. The hop capital of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know it. That's how I know it. Because I worked for Coors Brewing Company.
Oh, right.
And I had to go up to Yakima Valley. I did rodeo programs. I did scholarships in the area. Yeah.
Well,
so that's how I know Yakima Valley.
I'm a cop. Let me preface it by saying I was a cop. And,
Okay.
And it was the first time, remember I told you I grew up in a bubble?
Yeah.
It was the first time that I really seen what getting involved in gangs does to somebody's life trajectory.
Oh.
You just make one bad decision on top of another.
Yeah.
And you're influenced or this peer pressure to do stupid things.
Right.
And,
Stupid
and
illegal
so,
things.
I see that in the friends, that I had in school who then opted for that lifestyle. And it had gone really bad for them over and over again, where they went through the institutions and stuff. Narco traffic was getting to be a big deal then. Domestic violence, chronic alcoholism, suicide. I mean, you get to see all this as a cop, and you see the worst of the worst people,
Right.
and the worst of the best people, because they've been victimized and they're angry and they're and so, but there was hardly anybody who kind of spoke on these issues, and the ones that did, I didn't really align with them. The United Farm Workers Union had gotten big. Cesar Chavez had come and did some marches. I remember that in Toppenish.
Yeah.
And so they were trying to be the people's representative. And the folks that would speak up just had wrong ideas, I felt, and it would take us into the wrong direction. So
And it was very specific messaging, right? It was
very much
it was very agriculture-ish.
El patrón nos está oprimiendo.
Yeah,
they have
very
the foot of oppression on our necks. And he goes, wait a minute, they took care of my family.
Right.
These
We were the
good
same.
people,
We were in the same situation. My dad, we lucked out that we had a good foreman that, they gave me a first job, and they actually loaned my dad money to buy me a used car to drive to college. How
could you not be grateful?
Yeah, you're grateful every day
so
for that.
I didn't see that sense of gratitude. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that you kowtow to all, foremen and people.
No, claro, not everybody's
some of them
the
were
same.
bad, of course. Like
Right.
everything else, I think there's a human element to everybody.
Right.
But for the most part, my life experience is these were good and decent people, and so I just didn't agree with that kind of direction and that line of rhetoric or narrative. And so, I was kind of turned off by it. But I didn't like the fact that it was all white, no Latinos in the city council, and all the institutions were ran by, white people. God bless them. That's just.
I mean, they've been there. They've been in charge.
Right? Yeah, of course.
So,
there was no resentment. I just felt that there was no true representation. Right.
Right.
So I ran for city council because nobody else would.
So you were a cop at the time.
I had just left my position as a cop. I didn't like the shift work because I had just had a son, and I think I was having my second child, and it was like, yeah, I need to get a different job.
Yeah.
So I'd gotten a different job.
Oh, let's see here. I'm just gonna shift pressure, and I'm gonna run for a local office.
Which I ran with the sense of, just getting out there and proving to my friends that, no, I am going to do it just because you think I can't. And then it turns out I won.
Yeah, you're very competitive,
and so,
too.
I was on the minority end of a lot of votes. I was 6-1, a lot. So, for example, there was a lot of talk about, let's improve the east side, let's do what we can, let's shift resources and money.
But then nobody does it.
And then nobody does it, right? And then, we're going to get a community center, and now we have to vote where we're going to place it. Well, let's place it on the west side because it's going to be a jewel. And it's going to.
Didn't we just talk about the east side?
Why don't we put it on the east side? No, there's going to be, crime over there. We shouldn't. Senores, what are you doing?
Yeah, that starts to.
So that kind of stuff. I was always in the. But that. In a weird way.
So how long were you a local official? And what was that, city council,
4 years,
county?
I think it was city council.
City council, okay.
And I self-identified as a Republican. I didn't know you were supposed to be a Democrat at the time. Nobody told me. I love it. As a Latino in the state of Washington, but because I was pro-life and my Christian values and, hard work ethic and I didn't want government dependence and all that stuff, I just sort of identified as a Republican. When the party found out, they came after me and they recruited me. And then they started using me for a lot of the campaigns as a surrogate. Yeah, I'll do it because I believe in these values, right? And so I went to work for the candidate who ran for Congress, who won, Doc Hastings at the time, and then he hired me as a congressional staff assistant, and I was also running as a councilman at the time. And just one thing led to another. The Bush campaign called in 2000.
So how was that? So you're just like at home or you're at work or whatever, and you get a phone call. Like, share with us what that experience.
Call. It was Denise Gitson was her name. I still remember. And I said, yes, hello, this is Denise. I'm calling from the Latinos for Bush, campaign office. And, okay. She says, well, your name has been repeated several times to me as a
That's
person
cool.
who could
Did you ever find out who was repeating your name?
No. I don't know if it's party officials or the congressman or whoever, right?
That's always so cool.
It is cool, right? Yeah. When your name is often invoked like that,
right?
And so what can I do for you? He says, well, we're looking for somebody who can be the director of Latinos for Bush in the state of Washington. I'd love to do it. At the time I was all in, and so we went to work, and it went extremely well. And I got the call afterward, if you want to be part of the Bush administration.
I mean, what?
Hello? I was scared though, Marianne.
Why?
Well, because this is the first time that I'm gonna leave my family, my extended, my brothers and sisters, and I'm gonna leave the state, and I'm gonna go off to the East Coast that I've never been to.
Which is really interesting because I talk to students about this as well too. In that, we get that support. Yeah. We get that, mijo, you can do it, mija, you can do it, and they all figure it out, right? And everybody's helping you, and you're doing it. And you're bringing people with you, and then there's one thing that comes up that just pushes you in a different direction.
And
you're
overwhelms you a little bit.
Yeah, you're like,
I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C.,
right?
With these marble buildings, with people from Harvard and Yale and Princeton, and I'm a high school dropout. What the heck do I have to offer?
Yeah.
And that's...
No, it is. It is.
Te limitas.
Yeah.
It's like it's reductive, but I'm sorry, that's how I felt at the time, right? And it was also excitement. Santo Dios, here I am. I'm getting an opportunity to work for the President of the United States in Washington, D.C. Yeah. But then that fear strikes you.
It does.
And then I was reading this thing about presidential appointees where the first 3 months you're gonna ask yourself, what am I doing here, right? I don't belong here. And the next 3 months you're gonna ask yourself, what's this guy doing here?
That's awesome.
You find out real quick that wisdom is not exclusive to the folks that reside in these 4 square miles of limestone and marble buildings.
Yeah.
I've always felt that wisdom comes from family, culture, your community, from the hand of God Almighty, right? Your scripture that gives you so much wisdom. And it turns out, Marianne, that I was the one who had a perspective that nobody else had in the White House, after I left to the White House. Because I could speak to what migrant farm workers would go through.
Of course.
What challenges in education were.
Now we have different challenges in education.
Oh my God, yes, of course.
Yeah, that's different, but
it was a strength, not a weakness, turns out.
So is there like a really cool story you can share about your time in the White House? Something that you did, or someone that you helped, or something that still...
I can tell you probably the one thing that left me trembling was, if I can get through it. So when I was at the Department of Interior, that's the first office that I landed in, I made it to the executive team. I was one of 12 that would meet with the Secretary of the Interior every morning. We'd go through the issues of the day that were of high priority that the Secretary had to decide on. And sometimes there were piles of files that we had to go through and discuss, and then she would make a decision. And then we would execute on those decisions.
Right.
I was at Intergovernmental and External Affairs. I was the deputy director. But the director was out of Colorado, so I would take her place. Basically, that's how it worked out.
Okay.
One of the folders that she opened up was, should we allow 501c3 organizations to place water along the border on public lands?
Yeah.
And of the 11 or so, they said no, because that would induce more traffic. That's basically, putting out a welcome sign. That all these arguments about why we shouldn't. And so when it came up to me, I said, well, my father crossed the border on the shoulders of his uncle at 12 and at 14, before he legalized, as a farm worker. There, but for the grace of God, goes my father, right?
Yeah.
And my grandparents, who came as braceros también, right? But they had to cross, without authorization back then in the 50s, right? Which is a different situation.
It's a different situation, yeah. My dad did that in 52.
But it's the same rules apply, right? But humans need water.
Right.
And so we're talking about human lives here. People who,
Christian,
for want of opportunity, are coming to America. How are you not going
to give somebody water?
Course, yeah. We're not talking about cartel. We're not talking about criminal. We're talking about folks who are coming for want of opportunity, and they're going to die in the desert because we didn't allow a charitable institution, to put water. So, anyways, I made my arguments on. And I had a whole series of things, and so the secretary says, "I've heard all the arguments. I agree with Daniel." And she just kind of tossed it to the side, and next, like if it was nothing. And I sat back and I said, I don't know how many lives we just saw. And I was like trembling.
Yeah.
But everybody else just sort of carried on about their business like it was nothing. But I know it was huge, right?
Yeah.
And it's just those kind of things, that maybe it is God appointed. Maybe there is something to, you were meant to be there at that time.
Right.
Right. And I don't think anybody should diminish their own standing.
No, but when
you're given an opportunity, seize it.
Yeah, but when we grow up in an environment where people don't encourage you, people don't even see you.
Right. Yes.
Right? It's just like it's those. Nowadays it's like microaggressions, micro whatever. At that time, you're just like, It's just kind of to live with it. I'm trying to figure out what to say that's politically correct, and I'm not going to beep out in this podcast, right? Because it's hard. It's hard in terms of those areas.
It is, but it's like once I think you begin to understand the impact you can have on national policy, then you begin to have this kind of confidence.
Yeah.
It's just, we need to do more of that. Not on my behalf. And in the end, it's not about the title or position or the money or whatever the hell, you think you've achieved. It's what you've done for others.
Of course.
That matters,
yeah.
right? It's like, what have I done for my community?
That's a true servant leader. That's what you do. It's not about what you did but it's who you bring along with you, who's following, who have you benefited or has benefited from your initiatives, your policy perspectives, and who was at that table with you.
Yeah,
right?
No, 100%.
That maybe
Claro.
couldn't and would never have been there had it not been for you representing them at that time.
I think one of the greatest things about a leader is to identify the skills in others, hone those skills, and then allow those folks to rise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you started the Libre Initiative after you left the White House?
I went to work for Univision.
Oh, that's right.
As a television
That's right.
host.
Yeah.
And but it was during that time when you feel this disquietedness. I was like, God, I do not feel. Perdóname, LULAC and La Raza or Unidos US. You did not represent me. Your ideas and your gaze towards government as the answer to every social ill under the sun. Your liberal politics did not represent me. Yeah. I say that unapologetically.
Of course.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And so I felt.
No, there is no. I'm sorry. Is
well,
the point.
I mean, con todo respeto. I
Yeah,
guess is what I'm trying to say because
I
I understand what you're trying to do, but I think you have the wrong ideas, for our community. And I felt that millions of us were not being represented well through their advocacy. Mm-hmm. I felt we had to advocate for different policies that honored and upheld American principles.
Yeah.
And so, but where was this discussion? Where was this conversation? It was nowhere to be found in any organization that was operating at a national level for the Latino community. The conversation in the Latino community was one that was dominated by center-left television, whether it was Univision and Telemundo, Marxist university professors, los sindicatos, the unions, especially in states like Michigan and Nevada, the 501c3 organizations that were center-left. It was just a conversation that was one-dimensional, and I felt that needed to change. So we started Libre.
Awesome. And so how many lives do you think you've transformed and helped since you started Libre Initiative?
I have no idea. But I would
you have chapters across.
We're in 15 states with
Okay.
about 70 full-time staff, about 500 part-time. I'd like to think that we had something to do with the shift that you're seeing in America of the Latino community to the right. I think in having changed the conversation in the Latino community, that we introduced so many ideas as to a different alternative on policy that people just got tired of what they were getting from the left.
And also giving people an opportunity to look at a different point of view.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
I mean, so whether they agree or
honest
not.
Conversations
right?
About that,
it's just like just have different conversations,
Yeah.
have different perspectives, have more people at the table. So Daniel, this has been like I thought it was going to be. Awesome, beautiful, and just, an opportunity to kind of break bread with a friend in a very whole different conversation,
You're amazing.
So
make it easy.
My last two questions. One is actually, our vision statement is advancing the Hispanic community's diversity of thought. What does that mean to you?
Respecting each other. I mean, and that's what it's all about, right? That you respect my place in the world and I respect yours, your ideas. Look, I believe strongly in the expressions, the freedom of expression, and also that we have honest conversations. There is a lot at stake here for our community.
Yeah.
And we can either, sell them down the bad direction or, policies that are going to make them dependent, continue the poverty, live in a mediocre life, or we can look to policies that are going to allow everybody to rise. And those are the kind of discussions I want to have, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to be caught by partisan constraints or, no, this is the paradigm that we've accepted and that's that, the paradigm of power where government controls everything. We centralize all power, money, and control in the hands of politicians, and we live out for the aspirations of a politician. I don't give a damn about a politician's aspirations. I care about yours.
Right.
I care about you achieving your aspirations or your dreams. And what are the policies that are going to give you the freedom to do that, right? And create an environment in the marketplace for you to leverage your skills and your talents, in order, to do that, like my parents were able to do. And so I believe honestly in honest conversation, but we have to respect each other for that.
Totally. And sometimes they're difficult conversations, but that's part of the point.
100%.
If you have respect for each other, the rest should be a little bit easier. My last question is, obviously at the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute, we have internship programs, we have scholarships, we have leadership conferences. We're really focused on, the future leaders and really looking at providing opportunities specifically for Hispanic young leaders. So, with the depth and breadth of your experience through today, what is your advice to young professionals?
Oh, man.
Or maybe what's guided you that you think would help them?
I mean, look, nothing profound other than, obviously just keep making the right decisions, be responsible about decisions that you make, look to the future on everything. Look, and sort of, I don't know where I heard this once, but there's like, you have to consider who the most important person in your life is, the most important time in your life, and the most important words in your life. The most important person is the one in front of you now. You can't change the past. You don't know what the future is going to have. Interact.
Right.
Consider, pay attention to the person in front of you now. The most important words you're going to say are the ones you're going to say next, right? You can't, again, change the past or, you don't know what the future is going to hold. Consider what you're saying and what you're about to say and the consequences about what you're going to say. And the most important time in your life is now.
Is now.
Take advantage of it. Seize it. Make the right decisions. Control it.
Well, I also tell students that there is something that the richest person cannot donate or contribute, that the poorest person cannot accumulate, and that's time. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. So God bless, Daniel, for spending some of your precious 24 hours with me, with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
God bless, dear.
Honored. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Purple Line. Follow us on social media at The Chili, at THECHLI. Thank you for joining us on The Purple Line.